Hello everybody, this is Gregory with how I lost over 100 pounds and have kept it off for 30 plus years, where there should be no hesitance in your weight loss and maintenance. Today I'm going to talk about whether or not it's good to label yourself a food addict if you're struggling with weight loss and you have a disordered relationship with food. Now before we begin, if you need help with weight loss, contact me through the Clarity FM link found here in the episode notes. Also check out my 2 books, which you can find on Amazon, my website, which has hundreds of articles and recipes, and lastly, if you appreciate my content, there is a link for PayPal. Now, there's been a movement the last, I would say, 10, 15, 20 years to equate people with disordered eating as addicts. So we have pivoted quite a bit in the area of alcohol. And I think there's a lot of parallelisms, of course, between alcoholism and food addiction. So 40 years ago, let's say, most people would say, yeah, an alcoholic drinks too much. Oh, it sucks. They're destroying people's lives. And then there was kind of this more a sensitivity kind of turn on alcoholism and say, well, they're alcoholics, they can't control themselves, so forth and so forth. And so now you see people who have drinking problems who are honest with themselves, at least, will say, I'm an alcoholic. And I don't know if that's good or bad, in that saying you're an alcoholic and like, this is just something that I have, maybe takes away some culpability. But this video is really not about alcoholism. It's about food. So in the old days, it's like, well, if you're fat, well, there was a lot of social stigma and your life would not maybe be as good as if you were regular weighted. And it was more of a self-corrected issue. Like it was an issue. It's like, well, if you eat too much, this is your lot in life. It sucks. Well, now you're going to have to deal with the repercussions. And again, when we've had this sensitivity turn, look at the body positive movement, for example. It's like, well, if you're overweight, it's almost to the point, well, it's not your fault. Let's blame everybody but you. And now you're off you're scot-free off the hook. And now you've seen kind of the turn to, well, I'm a food addict. And it's like, oh, you're a food addict, then you're not responsible for what you put in your mouth. And I think my issue with it is the same issue that I have with the body positive movement. I can see the argument on one level because it's trying to bring compassion and understanding to the person who suffers from it. But I think long term, it's myopic and you're not really helping the person. Because I think when you define yourself as a food addict, it almost takes away culpability. Well, it's, I'm a food addict, so I can't control myself as I'm shoving food down my throat and all the self-loathing that comes with it. And the self-loathing leads to more eating and all the issues that we talk about here. And I think I'm not a big fan of it. Clearly, I wouldn't be doing a video on this if I was a big fan of using the term. I don't like that term. I think it's better to strip away all the BS and strip away the lies. I have a glandular problem. Look, at a certain age, there's a lot of people who get hypothyroidism, which does slow down your metabolism. You can maybe make that argument if you're regular weighted and then you started becoming chubby at 55 or 60, when that typically happens. But if you were overweight your whole life, you can't really blame it on your endocrine system as a whole. And I think if you meet people, or if you're one of these people who's always looking for an excuse as to why you're overweight, you're not ready to lose the weight. And if you do lose the weight, you're going to be one of those 80% of the people who regain it within 3 years. 50 pounds or more regain it within 3 years, because you haven't done the deep work. Like, everybody can crash a diet, but to maintain that, you can't crash a diet. You have to go back to regular eating and a regular association with food. And if you haven't done the deep work and you haven't disassociated your childhood trauma and use food as the nurturance to deal with that childhood trauma, or if you haven't disassociated emotions from food, then you're going to regain it. So that's my issue with the food addict term. I would much rather hear people who are overweight, and this is something that I don't remember if I said it or not because this was 30 years ago, but it's like, yeah, and this is what I like from alcoholics or drug addicts. But again, all these 3 groups, I think, especially the drug and alcoholics, are in such massive denial many times about what they have. And I think that's an impediment as to their long-term recovery. And I think most people who are experts in addiction would tell you that, right? The first step is admitting that you have this problem. And I just would rather hear from people who are overweight, I have a disordered relationship with food. I developed this whatever age or whatever time or due to whatever trauma. I turn to food when I shouldn't be turning to food. This is why I'm overweight. Instead of, well, it's this, it's my glandular issue, or even go back to childhood trauma. It's my father's fault. It's my mother's fault. It could be your mother and father's fault. I've talked about on the Confessions of an Obese Child playlist and on the podcast, my dysfunctional childhood, and the issues that my father inherited from his childhood and my mother inherited from childhood. But ultimately, like we talk about here, who cares? Doesn't matter. You can stay steeped in the past and have the victim mentality. Oh, this happened to me. Okay, you're going to blink, and you know what? You're still going to be fat 5 years from now. You have to have a winner mindset, a survivor, then a thriver mindset. And have, yes, I was dealt this deck of cards. That sucks. Yes, I have a disordered relationship with food, probably because of things that were outside of my control, like some sort of trauma. Yes, I'm 30 pounds overweight, 50 pounds overweight, whatever. Yes, this sucks. But you know what? I'm going to channel this anger or channel this frustration, and I'm going to start fresh, and I'm going to try to lose this weight. And I understand the best chance of me losing all this weight is to do the deep work and disconnect your childhood trauma from food, because you use food to nurture the wounds, to heal the wounds. Like when I was a kid, food doesn't talk back to you, food doesn't yell at you, food's not bullying you, all these things like that. So you have to get to that deep source. And I think when we use the term, I'm a food addict, it almost gives you an excuse to binge eat. Well, I'm a food addict, I can't control myself. And so you're just going to continue to eat. And ultimately, how is that going to help you? You're just going to get more overweight and shorten your life expectancy. And it's the same issue with the body positive movement. Is I understand the sensitivity, so to speak, that people want to give to overweight people, but ultimately you're not doing them a disservice, or you're doing them a disservice. You're not doing them a service, because the stats don't lie. And ultimately, fat people who stay fat are much more likely to die young. And ultimately, if you really love somebody, you're going to be cruel to be kind and tell them, you need to lose the weight. Loving them is not enabling bad behavior or giving them an emotional crutch by saying, oh, you're a food addict, or you know what, accept your body for what it is. In the long run, you're not really helping that person. But we live in this world where it's all inclusiveness, sensitivity, all this stuff that, because there's so many overweight people as well, that it's just like the blind telling the blind leading the blind. Like, oh, you're overweight, we're all overweight, so we're just going to say it's okay to be overweight. No, it's not. It's not okay to be overweight. It's not. It's not. Talk to your spouse, talk to your kids. They all want you to lose the weight if they were honest, because they love you and they know that you'll be more likely to be around longer if you lose the weight. So in closing, I'm not a big fan of admitting that you're a food addict. I think it's much better to strip down all the cognitive dissonance BS and to be honest with yourself and start the weight loss journey. And there's a lot of videos here that can help you with that. Guys, post in the comments if you agree or disagree. Hit the notification, subscribe, and share button. Until next time, take care. God bless and pray.